Monday, October 27, 2025. Welcome to the Noticias El Salvador SV podcast. In this space for conversation and reflection, where we explore together current topics in El Salvador and the world. You can provide your economic help via PayPal or through a Bitcoin QR code. The PayPal link you will find in the content description and the Bitcoin QR code on the cover of this episode. Send input subject of your transfer, the reason for the transfer, something like collaboration, talk about the topic I like, for you to have a little coffee, contribution for your podcast that's for internal control purposes. Also, remember you can advertise through this space if you are interested in the description at the email address. Write to us. We'll be very pleasant to hear from you. Look for us on your favorite platform on Spotify, Pandora, Apple Podcasts. We are on almost all of them as Noticias El Salvador SV. Okay, let's unpack this. We are immediately launching into a deep dive into the global and national news landscape, focusing heavily on today, Monday, October 27, 2025.
Right, but also keeping an eye on the key developments from the past weekend that really set the stage for today's news.
Exactly. Our sources today cover, well, quite a range. Everything from a massive Bitcoin rally, a new geopolitical alliance challenging Western systems, to some really pressing issues facing El Salvador. We're talking soaring debt, a national education deficit, and a truly heartbreaking crisis around missing deportees.
A lot to cover.
It is. Our mission, as always, is to try and filter this deluge of complexity and give you the essential context-rich nuggets you need to be thoroughly informed.
And what's fascinating here, I think, is just the sheer velocity of the global economic shifts we're seeing in today's reports. We often talk about how financial markets react to policy, but today it feels like an almost instantaneous feedback loop.
How so?
Well, you see geopolitical stability, or at least the hope for it, and central bank expectations directly triggering these massive moves in assets like Bitcoin, almost in real time.
Absolutely. Let's start right there then, with global finance. The price of Bitcoin saw a really significant bounce today. According to the reporting we have, Bitcoin climbed strongly, stabilizing around, $115,504 as of early this morning.
Yeah, and that move represents a pretty clear breakout from that stagnant trading range we've been watching, throughout October.
Right.
And this movement, it signals a strong return to what analysts call risk-on sentiment. Historically, Bitcoin and other, let's say, riskier assets tend to thrive when there's global certainty and cheap money.
And we got both delivered over the weekend, apparently.
Pretty much. We can trace this surge back to two incredibly powerful conventional forces, actually.
Okay, first being the United States-China trade situation. That's been a major source of market jitters for, years now. What happened over the weekend to change that dynamic?
Well, officials from both nations agreed on a fundamental trade framework. And it's designed specifically to prevent further escalation of their conflict.
Which is huge.
It is huge because it suggests a structural de-escalation, not just a temporary pause. The sources noted this framework covers some deeply contentious issues, including China's restrictions on rare earth exports.
Critical materials for high-tech manufacturing.
Exactly. And also those rising tariffs imposed by the United States.
So any movement towards stabilizing that relationship between the world's two biggest economies, it just instantly alleviates investor anxiety, right? About supply chains, global growth forecasts.
Precisely. That confidence, in turn, makes investors more willing to move capital into higher risk, higher reward assets. And this framework, it's set to be developed further when President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping meet later this week in South Korea.
Okay.
So removing that geopolitical risk factor, that opens the door for capital flow. And then the second driver just reinforces this by making capital cheaper, the Federal Reserve.
Right, the market's expectation of Federal Reserve policy action.
Yeah.
That's driving this too. We saw moderate inflation data come out of the United States recently, which fueled anticipation that the Fed will implement a rate cut, maybe 25 basis points this week, mirroring the cut they made back in September.
Yeah, the sources indicate the market is currently pricing in almost 100% probability of that 25 basis point cut.
Oh.
And to explain why this matters so much for Bitcoin, lower interest rates mean borrowing money gets cheaper. That fundamentally injects more liquidity into the financial system.
Okay.
So when the cost of money is low, things like fixed income and traditional savings, they just look less attractive. Investors are incentivized to seek higher yields in more speculative investments.
So cheap money, low global trade risk.
Yeah.
assets like Bitcoin become the primary beneficiaries of this rush for yield. It's a classic flight from safety into risk.
Makes sense. And on a related note, the United States Treasury Secretary also confirmed the 5 candidates vying to lead the Federal Reserve this week.
Okay. So while the rate cut expectation is providing that immediate certainty,
right, the market will be closely watching the selection process because the long-term direction of monetary policy really hinges on who gets that top job. Any uncertainty in leadership, even briefly, can temper aggressive market bets. So this confirmation is kind of an essential counterpoint to the rate cut optimism.
Good point. Okay, moving now from decentralized finance to state-level strategic alliances. We need to focus on a major geopolitical pact that was formally ratified today, the Russia and Venezuela agreement.
This is a monumental shift, really, in regional alignments, and it's a direct response to Western sanctions and, financial dominance. Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a decree ratifying a 10-year strategic partnership and cooperation agreement with Venezuela.
10 years.
Yeah, originally put in place with Nicolas Maduro back in May.
That 10-year commitment certainly suggests both parties are looking way beyond short-term political shifts. They're seeking deep, long-term alignment. What are the specific mechanisms they're putting in place here, especially given the challenges of operating under United States sanctions?
Well, this is where the agreement gets really fascinating because it's explicitly anti-Western in its financial structure. They've laid out 3 critical objectives. First, and maybe most importantly, is achieving financial autonomy.
Right.
They plan to implement their own financial mechanisms for trade and investment, explicitly aiming to avoid reliance on Western financial systems, especially the United States dollar.
How feasible is that, though? Creating an alternative financial mechanism. I mean, the U.S. dollar system dominates global commerce, energy trade.
That is the critical question, isn't it? It's immensely challenging, no doubt. But the mechanism likely involves increasing central bank liquidity swaps using their own national currencies, the Russian ruble, the Venezuelan bolivar for direct trade settlement.
Okay.
It might also involve increased use of non-Western payment platforms like China's CIPS or Russia's SPFS, the ones designed to bypass SWIFT. They won't escape the dollar's influence overnight, obviously.
Yeah.
But this pact formalizes their intent to build this parallel economic axis, particularly for their second objective,
Which is?
cooperation in strategic sectors.
Okay.
Precisely. They plan to deepen cooperation in oil, gas, and mining. For Venezuela, this means access to Russian expertise and investment to shore up its struggling energy infrastructure. They have vast, untapped reserves, remember.
Sure.
They'll also likely increase coordination within platforms like OPEC. And the third objective is increased technical military cooperation, explicitly to reinforce Venezuela's defense capacity. We're talking equipment upgrades, joint training, sending a clear message about mutual security assurances in the region.
So that ratification decree, it signals a formal solidification of a major counter-Western economic and military bloc, right on the doorstep of the Americas.
Absolutely. And while the major powers are restructuring their alliances, we also have a note on persistent, long-term political consolidation elsewhere. Paul Biya was re-elected for an 8th mandate in Cameroon.
An 8th mandate. That's a remarkable period of leadership. It's a reminder that political longevity is still a defining characteristic in many parts of the global South. Kind of contrasts sharply with the immediate transactional nature of the alliance as we were just discussing.
Definitely. Before we move on to the weekend news, though, we have a few rapid-fire updates on security and natural disaster.
Okay, first, a critical alert. Hurricane Melissa has strengthened. It's reached dangerous Category 5 status. Officials have placed Jamaica on high alert, warning the population to prepare for potential catastrophic flooding.
Cat 5. Given the rapid intensification, coastal communities there face an extremely serious threat. A storm of that magnitude requires massive preparatory efforts. That shift to Category 5 signifies immediate life-threatening danger from wind and storm surge, not just the rain.
Right. Okay, shifting to a fascinating security update from Paris. Remember that high-profile jewel theft at the Louvre?
Vaguely, yes.
Well, French police detained 2 suspects from Saint-Denis. But the real twist, internal compromise.
There it is. Investigators discovered that a member of the museum's own security team was in contact with the thieves. That internal link is almost always the linchpin in these sophisticated heists, isn't it? Providing crucial intel about routines, blind spots.
Exactly. The sources noted that one suspect was apparently preparing to flee to Algeria, the other to Mali. Does that choice of destination suggest anything?
It indicates a clear, pre-planned escape route using established international networks. likely involving organized crime groups specialized in moving stolen high-value goods across continents. The destinations suggest deep ties crossing the Mediterranean. It emphasizes the sophistication here. It wasn't just opportunistic.
Okay, and finally, a grim update on the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reported that the situation in Pokrovsk is complicated.
Complicated often means bad in these contexts.
Right. He stated that the Russians have concentrated their main strike group against Pokrovsk and have actually entered the city.
Pokrovsk is a critical logistics and transport hub in the Donetsk region. If the Russians consolidate control there, it opens up crucial pathways for advancing deeper into the Donbas. Zelensky's assessment of complicated is likely diplomatic language for intense, grinding urban warfare. It signals a significant recent advance by Russian forces.
Okay, let's transition now to our weekend flashback. Reviewing the global headlines from Saturday and Friday, October 26th and 25th, starting with a strange and frankly rare sequence of military incidents.
Yeah, this was unusual. On Saturday, October 26th, the United States Navy experienced two separate aircraft crashes into the South China Sea, both originating from the same carrier, the USS Nimitz.
Two crashes.
Within about half an hour of each other. First, a MH-60R Seahawk helicopter crashed around 2:45 p.m. local time. Then, about half an hour later, a FA-18, a Super Hornet jet, went down.
The rarity of two crashes from the same carrier group in such a tight time frame, that can't be overstated. Thankfully, the sources confirm all crew were rescued alive.
Which is a testament to the Navy's immediate response protocols.
Absolutely. But the proximity of the incidents raises serious questions. Potential simultaneous systems, failures, training issues, maybe even environmental factors specific to that moment. The investigation will be extremely intense, you'd imagine, focusing on common denominators.
No doubt. Moving south now, to South American politics. The weekend brought a massive consolidation of power for Argentina's president, Javier Milei. He achieved a strong majority victory in the legislative elections on October 26th.
This legislative triumph, it's the inflection point Milei needed, isn't it? It allows him to cement political control and, critically, push through his deeper, often controversial policy changes.
Like dollarization, massive cuts to state spending.
Right, without needing the significant, often crippling opposition negotiation that marked his first year.
Exactly. That consolidation of legislative power is essential for accelerating reform, and Donald Trump recognized this immediately. He issued high praise today, October 27, congratulating Milei on what he called an overwhelming victory.
That public endorsement from a former United States president, it just underscores the ideological alignment and the significance of Milei now having that mandate to act decisively.
Yeah.
Speaking of President Trump, our sources also provided a recap of a few recent geopolitical gaffes he made on the campaign trail, which, while sometimes treated lightly in domestic media, they carry significant diplomatic weight.
Right. The sources highlighted two specific incidents from Friday, October 25th. The first involved confusing the country of Armenia with Albania.
Okay.
This sort of mistake, it isn't just an accidental slip, it suggests a lack of attention to regional geopolitical details, which can be deeply unsettling for allies, in the Caucasus, Eastern Europe, who rely on clear, consistent messaging from the United States.
And the second gaffe?
Mistakenly listing Spain as a member of the BRICS economic group.
A BRICS member.
Yeah. Given that BRICS is actively trying to expand its influence as a counterweight to Western economic dominance, incorrectly adding a key European Union and NATO member like Spain to that bloc just confuses the diplomatic landscape. It generates unnecessary cleanup for both Spanish and United States foreign policy officials.
Right. These moments, however brief, they contribute to an overall perception of instability or unpredictability, which can definitely complicate complex international negotiations. Okay, a crucial transition now as we move our focus inward to the national deep dive for El Salvador. Covering news reported today, October 27, 2025. We start with the economy, and while there are some positive notes, that top-line debt figure is a significant cause for concern.
It really is the weightiest financial metric the country currently faces. The public debt level in El Salvador has reached, a staggering 88% of the gross domestic product. That's over $32.2 billion as of September 2025.
Okay, for our listeners, why is 88% considered such a heavy fiscal burden? What does that mean practically?
Well, that figure places El Salvador firmly in the high-risk category for emerging markets. For context, debt becomes a really serious concern when it consistently exceeds 60% of GDP. It restricts a government's ability to borrow affordably and service its existing obligations.
So higher borrowing costs in the future.
Exactly. Investors demand higher interest rates to compensate for that perceived default risk. And second, it pressures the government to make extremely difficult budgetary choices, often leading to underfunding of essential services, which I think we'll get into shortly.
Right. Okay. On a more positive economic front, the traditional strengths of the economy seem to be holding up. El Salvador's international coffee positioning has led to a major increase in exports, reaching $157.3 million sold through September 2025.
Yeah, that consistent strength in agricultural exports provides necessary foreign exchange reserves. It highlights a stable sector amidst the broader fiscal pressures, shows the global appetite for El Salvador's high-quality coffee remains robust.
And something consumers will appreciate immediately. Authorities announced a decrease in fuel prices for the upcoming fortnight, starting tomorrow, October 28th. Gasoline prices nationally are set to drop by up to $1.06.
It's a small drop, but that relief at the pump helps moderate inflation expectations for daily household costs, transport logistics, offers a minor reprieve for consumers struggling with the high cost of living.
Okay. Before we move on to policy and social issues, there was a very concerning demographic data point reported. Salvadoran men apparently have the lowest life expectancy in Central America.
This is a statistic that really requires immediate context and analysis. While the specific sources weren't detailed, low life expectancy for men in this region is often linked to several intertwined factors you see in wider public health reports. High rates of violence and trauma, lifestyle diseases, and significantly, patterns of mass emigration.
Emigration.
Yeah. When large numbers of younger, healthier males leave the country, the remaining population tends to skew older or perhaps less healthy, which can depress the overall average life expectancy figure. It's an indicator of deep societal strain.
Which naturally leads us to the university enrollment crisis. This is perhaps one of the most critical long-term national developments we've seen in the sources today. The key finding is simple, but frankly, devastating. Fewer Salvadorans enrolled in university programs in 2024.
This contraction in higher education is a direct threat to the country's long-term economic prospects. If you connect this back to that 88% GDP debt figure we mentioned,
Right.
El Salvador needs highly skilled human capital engineers, specialized technicians, economists to generate the productivity and wealth necessary to service that debt and move towards sustainable development. A reduction in enrollment signals a contraction in the supply of future specialized labor.
So what are the primary theories cited in the sources? Why are young people choosing not to pursue university degrees?
It seems like there are several intersecting reasons. One is perceived economic opportunity. If young people believe they can earn faster, albeit lower, wages in the immediate term, or if they're planning to emigrate, the high cost and time investment of university just becomes prohibitive.
Makes sense.
Plus, the overall economic uncertainty, coupled with the heavy focus on security measures, probably means less public investment in higher education infrastructure and fewer incentives for students to stay.
We do have some demographics on the students who did enroll. The majority are women, and most opted for in-person study, rather than remote or hybrid programs, suggests a preference for traditional learning environments. But the overall reduction is the headline.
Definitely. The sources correctly framed this reduction as a national wake-up call. They argue, and I think rightly so, that the country's future ability to innovate and compete internationally relies heavily on young people continuing to study and pursuing their dreams within El Salvador. Not viewing immigration as the only viable path to professional success, it underscores a worrying trend of brain drain accelerating.
Okay, turning now to the budgetary decisions finalized for 2026. We see some interesting allocations reflecting current governmental priorities. Non-governmental organizations, for example, are budgeted to receive $20.2 million.
And we see a specific allocation for a relatively new instrument of control. The Registro de Agentes Extranjeros, the Foreign Agents Registry, will be allocated $600,000 for 2026.
Okay, briefly, for our audience, what is the intended function of this Foreign Agents Registry, and why is this allocation noteworthy?
Well, the registry is intended to provide state oversight and, some would say, control over international influence. It requires individuals and organizations that receive foreign funding, particularly NGOs or media organizations, to register as foreign agents. This measure is often viewed by external observers as a way to monitor and potentially limit the activities of critical voices or organizations getting money from outside the country. Allocating $600,000 to this registry signifies the government's commitment to ensuring transparency. or exerting control, depending on your perspective, over international financial flows and political influence in the coming year.
We also have a significant social concern highlighted in the budget for local development. Apparently, fewer older adults will receive the universal basic pension in 2026.
This is a deeply concerning social impact, likely linked back to the high national debt. The universal basic pension is a crucial social safety net for older adults who may not have private retirement savings.
Absolutely.
Reducing the number of recipients suggests difficult choices in resource allocation. Prioritizing other expenditures, perhaps debt servicing or security, over the commitment to the country's most vulnerable aging population. This will likely put increased pressure on families and local communities to support their elderly relatives.
Next, let's address public health, which reports suggest is under severe strain in the metropolitan area. A report detailed patient suffering due to shortages and deficiencies in key health units in the San Salvador metropolitan area, specifically Concepcion and Zacatecas.
The list of issues cited is alarming. Long wait times for basic medical attention and, crucially, a lack of essential medication. Patient suffering here isn't theoretical. It means postponed procedures, untreated chronic conditions. The medical guild quoted in the sources suggested that the health system is suffering from neglect.
When a medical guild uses a word like neglect, what does that imply about the system's operational failure?
It implies a chronic underallocation of resources, not just for fancy new equipment, but for fundamental operational needs like maintaining drug inventories and adequate staffing levels. In the context of the high national debt, it suggests that the necessary funding simply isn't reaching the front lines of healthcare, leading to a systemic breakdown in the ability to provide basic services, even in the country's largest metropolitan area.
And on a related health watch, the Ministry of Health also reported 10 cases of leishmaniasis in the country. Just a reminder that infectious diseases continue to require vigilance alongside these structural health crises.
Always something.
Okay, we now transition to the security and justice section of our national deep dive. Starting with an update on the progress of the special security regime, the Régimen d'Exception.
Yeah, the fact that 91.3% are still in this phase signals an immense procedural bottleneck. The sheer volume of cases risks overwhelming the court system, potentially slowing down due process and creating massive strains on the prison infrastructure needed to hold them while awaiting trial.
The sources also confirmed that gang members are being processed in groups, which is a procedural measure implemented under the current regime, presumably to increase efficiency.
It's likely a necessity given the volume, yes. But it also raises questions about the ability of the system to ensure individualized review of evidence and proper representation for each person.
Right. Beyond arrests, authorities reported seizing over 24 tons of drugs so far this year.
That's a staggering figure, a clear metric of the aggressive interdiction efforts targeting the supply lines of criminal networks.
However, public safety on the roads remains a challenge. 3 drivers were detained across the country just today for driving under the influence. The reports included specific alarming incidents too, like a drunk man arrested for shooting at a vehicle in Sensen Tepic, and another drunk driver arrested after causing an accident in Chalatenango.
These individual security incidents illustrate that while the primary security focus is understandably on dismantling gangs, everyday threats like reckless driving and potentially violence linked to intoxication remain pervasive challenges for law enforcement and public safety.
Okay, here's where security, justice, and international relations converge, and the picture is deeply troubling. The deportation crisis and the issue of missing persons.
This is perhaps the most sensitive and, frankly, heart-wrenching issue in today's sources. Oscar Chacon, a prominent activist, issued a stark warning regarding the immense vulnerability of the Salvadoran diaspora in the United States. He stated that around 700,000 Salvadorans are potentially victims of this attack in the United States.
The use of the word attack is strong. It suggests immense duress. What specific policy or enforcement shift is the activist referring to that places such a large population at risk?
It likely refers to the increasingly aggressive and, some would say, punitive immigration enforcement policies in the United States, coupled with the ongoing uncertainties surrounding legal status for many long-term residents. Chacon seems to be highlighting the constant threat of deportation, family separation, and the systemic challenges faced by undocumented individuals under these high-pressure enforcement regimes.
And the immediate devastating consequence of this policy is the disappearance of deportees upon return. Families of 6 Salvadorans who were deported from the United States have publicly denounced their disappearance. They allege their relatives are being held in local prisons without any official information provided by authorities here.
This lack of transparency and communication, it transforms a legal deportation into a profound humanitarian crisis for the families involved. The systemic failure to account for these individuals upon their arrival back in El Salvador suggests a serious breakdown in the processing and tracking of deportees entering the national justice system.
The human tragedy is just so vivid in the individual stories reported. For example, one family actually returned to El Salvador from the United States, where they had lived for 9 years.
Returned from the U.S.?
Yes, specifically to try and locate their 24-year-old son, Irvin, who was deported back in March and has since disappeared.
Imagine the desperation. Leaving a life established over nearly a decade in the United States, only to return to your home country to navigate a legal system that seems unable or unwilling to account for your son's whereabouts after he was placed in state custody. This specific case reveals profound questions about accountability, transparency, and due process for individuals immediately following deportation. It turns the judicial system into a black box for concerned relatives.
It's deeply concerning. This concludes the deep dive into the specific news items of October 27th. We need to take a quick pause now to remind you about how you can support the work we do here and help keep this conversation and reflection going.
Absolutely. The rigor and depth of the analysis we try to provide really relies on your engagement and support.
As a quick reminder, you can provide your economic help via PayPal or through the Bitcoin QR code. The PayPal link you will find in the content description, and the Bitcoin QR code is conveniently located on the cover of this deep dive. When you send your transfer, please use the subject line for internal control purposes, something like collaboration, talk about the topic I like, for you to have a little coffee, or contribution for your deep dive. Your contributions keep the conversation and reflection going strong, allowing us to continue extracting the essential insights from this complex news cycle. Welcome back. We've covered the major stories from today, but let's jump into the weekend national flashback, covering Saturday and Friday, October 26th and 25th, starting with a troubling incident involving sports rivalry.
Yeah, the weekend brought a high-profile case of violence linked to soccer fanaticism. On Saturday, October 26th, a massive police operation resulted in the capture of over 20 Alianza soccer fans.
20 fans.
Yes, this followed a violent attack perpetrated against a bus carrying fans of the rival team, FAS, near the Opico turnoff.
This incident wasn't isolated, right? It was significant enough that both the Alianza and FAS clubs felt compelled to issue formal public communiques regarding the acts of violence.
That's right. It highlights a continuing failure to contain this rivalry-driven violence, which spills over dangerously from the stadium to public transport routes, infrastructure. The scale of the police response, over 20 arrests, underscores just how severe the attack was.
Okay, moving to the environment. Saturday saw a large gathering demanding the conservation of Finca El Espino. The protest was specifically aimed at potential deforestation linked to future construction projects planned by the Municipal Works Directorate, or DOM.
Right. For listeners, the DOM is a highly influential governmental entity responsible for planning and executing public works and construction projects across municipalities.
And Finca El Espino.
It's a vital green space in the San Salvador metropolitan area, often considered the lungs of the capital. The protest highlights that intense tension between the need for infrastructure and development projects, which the DOM drives, and the critical importance of preserving existing ecological resources for the environment and public well-being.
And on a weather note, the Ministry of the Environment reported that the first cold front of the season is approaching Salvadoran territory.
A welcome, if temporary, change for the temperature, perhaps.
Perhaps. Turning to administrative and cultural updates from the weekend. On October 25th, the government officially closed its Institute of Animal Welfare. They are now actively seeking a new organizational plan for animal protection moving forward.
That signals a significant restructuring of their approach to this issue. It suggests a move away from a dedicated autonomous institute towards potentially integrating animal welfare responsibilities directly under a broader ministry, or maybe creating a new decentralized agency focused just on enforcement.
So the structure is still unclear.
The search is ongoing, according to the sources. The goal is likely to streamline operations, but these transitional periods often leave animal protection efforts vulnerable.
Culturally, the second Regional Art and Design Festival was inaugurated at the Tazumal Archaeological Park. It's always encouraging to see historic, culturally significant sites being used as backdrops for contemporary artistic events.
Definitely. And we have an international cultural note from the weekend as well. The death of the Swedish actor Bjorn Andresen was confirmed today. He passed away Saturday at age 70. He's famous internationally for his defining role as Tadzio in Luchino Visconti's iconic 1971 film Death in Venice.
Ah, yes. A truly memorable role. His passing marks the loss of a figure whose place in cinematic history remains complex and celebrated.
Indeed.
Wrapping up the sports news for today, Monday, October 27th. Locally, Luisango Firpo remains the league leader after defeating Platense. In Formula One, Lando Norris won the Mexican Grand Prix, taking the lead in the F1 World Championship.
Big win for him. On the global stage, however, soccer is grappling with a major integrity scandal. Hundreds of referees in Turkey have been accused of betting on soccer matches.
Hundreds. That's huge.
It's a potential crisis for sports integrity. It completely undermines the fundamental trust you need in officiating. Allegations on this scale demand immediate international attention to prevent corruption from eroding the legitimacy of the league.
Absolutely. We also saw a significant report highlighting the precarious labor conditions impacting South American female soccer players in the League of Nations. It detailed issues like substandard pay, lack of health benefits, inadequate training facilities.
This report underscores the ongoing global fight for equitable labor standards in women's professional sports. While male athletes often enjoy massive investments, this report is a stark reminder that female athletes frequently operate under conditions that barely meet professional standards, limiting their ability to train and compete effectively.
A persistent issue. Okay, finally, a truly bizarre and unexpected nature story to end this section. The fascinating case of Arnie, an Australian freshwater cod. This fish apparently surprised scientists by swimming 860 kilometers in an Australian river.
860 kilometers. That is an immense distance for any freshwater species, let alone a cod. This feat of aquatic endurance might be setting a new record for the species. It's forcing scientists to reevaluate their understanding of movement and migratory behavior of freshwater fish, especially in complex river systems.
Arnie the cod is giving researchers a new definition of tenacity.
He certainly is.
Indeed. Okay, to briefly synthesize the complex landscape we covered today. We started with that global financial rebound, noting the significant Bitcoin surge. Driven, it seems, entirely by optimism regarding the United States-China trade agreement framework and that near-certain expectation of a Federal Reserve interest rate cut.
Geopolitically, the ratification of the Russia-Venezuela 10-year strategic alliance signals a deepening commitment to an alternative financial and military system, one designed explicitly to circumvent Western dominance.
Domestically in El Salvador, we addressed the alarming economic metrics, particularly the public debt hitting 88% of GDP, which seems directly linked to social strains like the underfunding of public health units and that troubling reduction in older adults receiving the universal basic pension.
And most critically, perhaps, we highlighted the long-term threat posed by the education deficit, with fewer Salvadorans enrolling in university, a situation rightly labeled a national wake-up call. And of course, the humanitarian crisis stemming from the concerning number of missing Salvadorans deported from the United States, whose families are desperately seeking accountability.
Looking at these complex national issues, that 88% GDP debt figure, and the simultaneous critical drop in university enrollment, we're left with a powerful and I think provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider.
If the country prioritizes immediate large-scale security measures and incurs massive debt, potentially crowding out other investment, what are the long-term human and economic costs of not concurrently making sustainable investments in future human capital and education?
Right. The choices made in today's budget and in how young people view their future within El Salvador will fundamentally define the economic landscape and quality of life for the next generation.
It's a critical balance.
That is certainly a vital question to reflect upon as you process the news. This concludes our deep dive for today. As a reminder, you can support our work and help keep these conversations going through your economic help via PayPal or the Bitcoin QR code. The PayPal link is in the content description, and the Bitcoin QR code is on the cover of this deep dive. Thank you for listening, and we invite you to continue exploring the world and El Salvador with us.